Welcome to the new video of NeuroPhilos. Get ready to dive into a gripping tale that will leave you breathless, thinking, and inspired. Whether you're here for the mystery, the drama, or the unexpected twists, you're in the right place. Make sure to hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe so you never miss another powerful story. Let's begin **** the masks we wear. Alessandro Conte arrived in Verona on a crisp spring morning. The cobblestones still damp from an overnight shower. He carried a satchel of letters of recommendation, each praising his honesty, generosity, and unyielding moral compass. At 19, he believed virtue was the highest form of power and idea nurtured by his parents in their modest provincial villa, where every act of kindness was celebrated and cruelty shunned. Verona, however, felt different. Its streets pulsed with ambition. Merchants shouted in crowded markets, and political intrigue lurked behind every ornate balcony. Alessandro's heart raced with equal parts excitement and trepidation as he ascended the steps of the Council of 12 within the marble hall. His arrival drew curious glances. Counselors in velvet doublets and gold chains paused their discussions to observe the newcomer. Alessandro bowed respectfully to the presiding magistrate, his back stiff, his cheeks flush with pride. "I am Alessandro Conte," he announced, in clear, ringing tones, "and I offer my service to Verona's good." The hall remained silent for a heartbeat before applause rippled through the benches. Aki smiled, believing he had won approval. Yet beneath their polite smiles, Alessandro sensed something else, amusement. In the days that followed, Alessandro sought to prove his worth. He volunteered to deliver petitions personally, trudging between noble estates and humble workshops alike. He listened to grievances with patient attention, calming angry voices and promising to advocate on their behalf. When he learned that poor families had been denied grain during a harsh winter, he arranged for supplies at his own expense. Word spread quickly, Conte cares for all. The poor cheered, but many of the wealthy regarded him as naive, easy target for manipulation. Indeed, merchants with secret debts and corrupt guildmasters soon understood that Alessandro's generosity presented an opportunity. One morning, a delegation of cloth merchants petitioned him to forgive a disputed tax, promising that they would invest in public works. Alessandro, moved by their eloquent pleas, spoke passionately before the council. "Let us relieve them," he urged, "so that prosperity may flourish." The council, wary of precedent, tabled the motion. The merchants, however, took his support as a guarantee and began to default on existing obligations. Confident Alessandro would sympathize with their plight again. Late one afternoon, Alessandro discovered a clerk in the granary had been embezzling grain intended for the city's poor. Without hesitation, he exposed the crime in council, presenting ledgers and witness testimonies. The clerk was banished, and Alessandro's reputation as an incorruptible servant soared. Citizens lined the streets to cheer his name. Street performers composed ballads in his honor. Yet among the applause, he noticed hardened faces grain. Merchants lost profits. Warehouse owners faced new inspections. and those accustomed to turning a blind eye to petty theft now bristled at his interference. In the weeks that followed, Alessandro found his once friendly handshakes replaced by cold nods. Invitations to dinners dwindled. A wealthy patron, whose mills had failed inspection, crossed the street to avoid him. Gossip circled that Alessandro was self-righteous, a meddler who upset the city's delicate balance. When Alessandro attempted to offer explanations, counselors cut him off, muttering that his moralizing speeches had grown tiresome. He felt confusion and pain. His every virtuous act had generated enemies, while his outspokenness sowed distrust among those he wished to help. Alessandro retreated to the grand library at midnight. Seeking solace among its silent shelves, he had grown tall and serious-looking, his dark hair tied back, his robe neat, though his eyes revealed fatigue. Under flickering candlelight, he pored over treatises on ethics, theology, and civic duty. Yet none explained why his goodness had become a liability. Why did charity offend some? Why did truth earn scorn? Exhausted, he closed each book only to be haunted by the paradox of virtue in a world that rewarded cunning. One evening, familiar voice startled him. Still looking for answers? His mentor, Father Benedetto, approached in his somber cassock. The old priest's keen eyes softened as he regarded Alessandro. "You wanted to change Verona with virtue," Benedetto said, "but you failed too. See the currents beneath its surface?" Alessandro shook his head. "Virtue should be enough," he replied. "Goodness demands respect." The priest sighed. "Respect, yes, but in Verona, respect must be earned by more than kind deeds. Power is the art of appearances and allegiances. A single act of mercy means little if enemies exploit it." In council the next morning, Alessandro listened as the chamber deliberated a contentious new trade agreement. Merchants lobbied fiercely, each side offering bribes and threats. When Alessandro rose to speak in favor of clemency toward a bankrupt merchant guild, the opposing faction circulated. Rumors that he had accepted illicit gold? Though untrue, the slander stuck. Whispers spread that Alessandro's support was not born of principle, but of hidden ties. Counselors grinned, as though amused by his misfortune. Alessandro's cheeks burned with indignation and hurt. His honesty had been twisted against him, revealing his blindness to more nuanced forms of power. After the session, Marquis Ferrara, the council's veneer of civility, intercepted him in the hallway. "You are too open," Conte Ferrara said, voice low. "In this city, openness is weakness. Power resides in control of information, alliances, and fear." Alessandro recoiled. "I will not serve by deception." Ferrara's lips curved into a thin smile. "No one asks you to abandon honesty," he said, "only to temper it with prudence. Appear good if you must, but conceal your intentions." He turned on his heel, leaving Alessandro trembling. The warning echoed in his mind. Goodness alone was not safe. That night, Alessandro stood on his balcony overlooking the city lights. He imagined his life as a simple mural, black and white, good and evil. Yet Verona's tapestry was woven from countless shades of gray, each thread a subtle pledge or silent threat. He realized he had worn the mask of innocence, believing that virtue sufficed. Now, he understood the need for a different mask, the mask of prudence. He would retain his moral core, but adopt the outward ambiguity necessary to survive. In his journal, Alessandro wrote, "Virtue, unguarded, invites exploitation. To serve Verona, one must cloak benevolence in strategy, conceal mercy behind silence, and speak truth with caution. A mask does not betray the soul, it protects it." He closed the leather-bound volume and extinguished the lamp. As midnight deepened, Verona slept under the watchful eyes of statues and stars, unaware that Alessandro Conte, once the city's shining idealist, had begun his transformation into something more complex, more formidable, and infinitely more necessary. The Prince of Shadows, Alessandro Conte, could not sleep. That evening, he returned to the Grand Library, lantern in hand, determined to find answers far beyond prayers and homilies. He roamed aisles of leather-bound tomes until he discovered a slender volume tucked between works on rhetoric and statecraft, Il Principe, by Niccolo Machiavelli. The cover was worn, inked notes crowded its margins. Alessandro settled at a heavy oak table, opened the book, and read into the small hours. Machiavelli's words struck like cold steel. A wise ruler cannot keep faith when keeping faith is. To his disadvantage, Alessandro drew in a breath. Could honesty truly be less valuable than cunning? He read on. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. He stared at the phrase, heart pounding. He had believed that earnestly seeking love and respect governed the world, but here was advice that turned his faith upside down. He translated passages from Italian, absorbing tales of princes who triumphed through calculated cruelty, expedient lies, and ruthless pragmatism. Cesare Borgia emerged as exemplar, a leader who seized power by betraying allies and administering harsh justice, never hesitating to sacrifice the few for the stability of the many. Alessandro closed his eyes, recalling the clerk he'd banished, the merchants he'd defended, the petitions he'd championed. All had led to unintended consequences. Merchants who cheated, guildmasters who gossiped, counselors who mocked him behind closed doors. He saw the truth of Machiavelli's maxims reflected in Verona's own intrigues. Beneath his principled deeds lay vulnerability. He had offered his heart before deploying his mind. He resolved to learn the art of dissimulation. That night, he slept little and dreamed of courts and conspiracies. In dreams, he donned a dark cloak and moved among shadows, whispering rumors, forging alliances with a nod, concealing true intentions beneath a mask of courtesy. He awoke before dawn with his resolution forged. At sunrise, Alessandro attended a meeting of the council that had been scheduled to address a rising tide of grain shortages. Representatives of the Weavers' Guild and the Millers' Consortium clashed in heated debate. Both sides accused the other of hoarding supplies, threatening violence if their demands went unmet. Alessandro rose to speak. In years past, his impulse would have been to urge compassion for the poorest families, to demand inspections and relief. Instead, he allowed both factions to exhaust themselves in vitriol. He listened, face impassive, words measured, when exhaustion crept into their voices. He suggested a temporary compromise. He would convene a fact-finding committee in 2 days. Bearing a stern countenance that conveyed disapproval for either side's extremism, he then adjourned the session. Outside the chamber, murmurs spread that Alessandro had shown unusual restraint. Neither guild felt aggrieved by his silence. Instead, both feared he was withholding judgment. That small uncertainty is what Machiavelli had called indispensable ambiguity. When people do not know your stance, they hesitate to act against you. Over the next 2 days, Alessandro cultivated his new persona. He received petitioners in his private study, but when asked for immediate favors, he postponed them politely, requesting written proposals and witness statements. He practiced restraint even in charity, once presented with a plea from a widow whose children hungered. He offered her a small stipend but insisted she present her case formally to the council. The widow left distraught. Alessandro felt a pang of guilt but reminded himself that compassion could be standardized through procedure. This guarded generosity would prevent exploitation by false claimants. Meanwhile, whispers of Alessandro's transformation reached the ear of Marquis Ferrara. One afternoon, in a secluded corridor thicker with torchlight than daylight, Ferrara confronted him. "Conte," he rasped. "You read Machiavelli. Good. Now remember, power lies in 2 things: control of reputation and management of fear." Alessandro nodded, restraining his resentment. "Your weakness was once open kindness," Ferrara continued. "Your strength will be the art of perception." Alessandro met the Marquis's gaze and saw approval there rather than scorn. He inwardly acknowledged that his former mentor had imparted only half the lesson. Now he must learn the rest on his own. That evening, at a reception hosted by the council, Alessandro observed the city's elites mingling under candlelit chandeliers. He mingled among them with an intentional gate-polite but distant laughter, soft and rare. He listened more than he spoke, asking curt questions and nodding thoughtfully. A diplomat from Florence attempted to engage him in friendly banter, praising his recent interventions. Alessandro responded with courteous thanks and complimented the diplomat's genteel manners. He hinted that he was considering inviting Florentine investors to Verona without promising any concrete invitation. The diplomat's eyes gleamed. Alessandro withdrew, having planted the idea that he wielded significant influence over external alliances. 2 days later, when the grain crisis reconvened, the warring guilds surprised the council. Both sent representatives to present unified proposals, each hoping to curry favor with Alessandro's committee. They had discovered that his committee's finding would determine their fate. In the hushed chamber, Alessandro delivered his report, a balanced summary that blamed both sides for mismanagement yet praised their willingness to collaborate. He instructed the council to oversee distribution directly for 3 weeks, suspending all invoices for that period. Neither guild could claim triumph, but both secured temporary relief. By framing the outcome as shared victory, he diffused tensions and asserted his own indispensability. Afterward, a senior counselor, Countess Loredana, approached him. "I have watched your methods change," she said. "You temper charity with calculation. Is this the same Alessandro Conte who spoke of virtue above all?" Alessandro smiled, concealing his thoughts. "Virtue remains," he replied, "but virtue without strategy is a rose without thorns, beautiful, yet defenseless." The Countess studied him and nodded, as though congratulating him on his newfound wisdom. Returning home that night, Alessandro paused in the flickering lamplight and retrieved his journal. He composed a new entry. Machiavelli teaches that the world is governed by appearances rather than truths. Henceforth, I shall present only what furthers my ends and conceal what might betray me. Mercy will be dispensed on my terms, and resolve will be masked by benevolence. He paused, pen hovering. Then he added, I shall wear the mask of goodness, but the hand beneath must remain invisible. As he closed the journal, a sense of power unlike any he had known filled him. His heart no longer trembled at the thought of duplicity. Instead, he felt mastery. He recognized that his temptation to serve only the virtuous had blinded him to the fierce currents of political life. Now, armed with Machiavelli's lessons, he would move through Verona's halls as both healer and shadow-dispensing kindness, with deliberate measure and wielding fear with subtle precision. The idealist who once believed truth superior to all had become something deeper, a prince of shadows forging a path where morality and strategy converged. In that convergence, he would secure his place and perhaps, in time, bring genuine stability to the city he had embraced. The game of alliances the dawn mist still clung to. Verona's ramparts when urgent messengers arrived at the council's antechamber. Reports from the border town of Monticello spoke of Mantuan troops gathering beyond the Adige River. Their banners flapping in the chill breeze. Panic rippled through the council. Merchants feared supply disruptions, nobles worried for their estates, and commoners whispered of conscription. Alessandro Conte, now chancellor, sensed that Machiavelli's lessons would be tested not in his study but on Verona's fields. He read the grim dispatches as candlelight danced on his polished desk, heart steady in the face of rising fear. That morning, the council convened in the grand hall. Heavy oak doors shut with solemn finality as Alessandro entered, his robes dark and unadorned. Members murmured anxiously. Eyes darted between the Marquis Ferrara and Alessandro's calm figure. The Marquis cleared his throat. Mantua threatens our borders. Shall we sue for peace, raise troops, or surrender the villages of San Pietro and Galtieri to buy time? He paused, letting the weight of the question settle. Some favored immediate concessions. Others demanded war. The hall fractured into factions, each seeking advantage. Alessandro rose, palms open and voice measured. We must secure Verona's survival without igniting ruin. He allowed both sides to present their cases, fully war hawks on one side, peace advocates on the other, while he listened, mask unfazed. When dissent reached fever pitch, Alessandro proposed a temporary alliance with Venice. He would send an envoy to negotiate naval support along the Po, promising expanded trading rights in exchange for troops stationed near Monticello. Simultaneously, he suggested inviting Mantua's envoys to discuss a truce. Under the guise of goodwill, buying precious time for reinforcements, the council fell silent. Neither faction could accuse him of bias. Both saw merit in his dual approach. Over the next week, Alessandro orchestrated his plan. He dispatched a confidential letter to the Venetian Doge, drafted with precise language to flatter Venice's mercantile ambitions. He arranged a lavish banquet for Mantuan envoys in Verona, ensuring they felt welcomed and respected. At the same time, he quietly met with border commanders, instructing them to fortify positions discreetly and to spread rumors that Verona's defenses were stronger than they appeared. Machiavelli had counseled that a prince must sometimes feign weakness to distract enemies. Alessandro now practiced the reverse, feigning strength to deter attack, while fortifying silently behind the scenes. The banquet hall glittered with silver candelabras and tapestries. Mantuan representatives, clad in fur-trimmed cloaks, toasted Verona's hospitality. Alessandro addressed them. "We desire only peace along the Adige. Let us share trade and fellowship rather than bloodshed." His tone was warm, his eyes gentle. The envoys nodded, convinced that Verona sought genuine reconciliation. Meanwhile, Alessandro's agents circulated subtle rumors in Mantua that Verona had already hired Venetian galleys, and that Venetian soldiers marched toward the border. The Mantuan commanders, fearing entrapment, hesitated to order an invasion. In Venice, the Doge's council debated Alessandro's proposition. Merchants spoke of opening the Po to Verona's exports. Admirals cautioned against entanglement in mainland disputes. Alessandro had crafted his letter to emphasize Verona's potential as a trading partner rather than as a military ally, focusing on economic gain over political risk. His proposal passed unanimously, and Venetian troops were dispatched to Monticello's outskirts within days. The deployment was modest but highly visible. Galleys glided along the river, mercenary banners snapping in the wind. Word reached Mantua. Verona was not alone. Back in Verona, the council hailed Alessandro's diplomacy. As brilliant, peace advocates praised his vision. Hawks claimed he had shrewdly bought time to strengthen defenses. In truth, Alessandro had balanced both interpretations exactly as Machiavelli had taught. A prince must appear virtuous, yet act decisively. He had demonstrated clemency by inviting Mantua to the table, and resoluteness by securing Venetian support. The veneer of generosity hid a web of strategy. Yet, as applause filled the chamber, Alessandro was not content. He knew alliances forged for convenience could unravel at the first strain. To cement loyalty, he extended personal favors. He awarded minor titles to key counselors who supported his plan, granting them oversight of newly fortified border towns. To border commanders and mercenary captains, he offered bonuses tied to the speed of their response, ensuring they remained vigilant. Each reward was calibrated so that no recipient could neglect their duties without risking the chancellor's displeasure. Beyond the council, Alessandro nurtured public opinion. He commissioned poets to compose odes to Verona's unity and to his own wisdom under pseudonyms, of course. Street performers recited lines extolling the city's resilience and the chancellor's prudence. He authorized the placement of heraldic banners along main thoroughfares, lions and fish intertwined, symbolizing Verona's alliance with the seafaring Republic of Venice. These symbols reassured citizens that Verona commanded respect, even as they reminded Mantua of Venice's backing. Despite these triumphs, Alessandro harbored unease. He remembered Machiavelli's warning that alliances could turn on a whim. Men are ungrateful, fickle, false. He therefore prepared contingencies. He instructed secret envoys to contact Milan, offering future trade routes should Verona require another ally. He directed that supplies be stockpiled in hidden caches along lesser-traveled roads. At night, he reviewed boundary maps by candlelight, marking alternate routes for supply caravans should Monticello fall. Every precaution stemmed from a principle he now held dear: trust nothing that could compromise the state. One blustery morning, the Mantuan envoys returned to Verona. They informed the council that their prince, pacified by Alessandro's courtesy, and concerned by Venetian vessels, had agreed to a non-aggression pact for 6 months. The news erupted in cheers. The council lauded Alessandro, promising him their undying gratitude. Even the stoic Marquis Ferrara allowed himself a rare grin. But Alessandro saw beyond the celebration. He knew Mantua's prince might renounce the pact if fortunes changed, if Venice withdrew its support, or if Mantua forged other pacts. Statecraft, Alessandro realized, was neither permanent nor purely moral. It was a perpetual contest of leverage and perception. That evening, Verona's streets glowed with lantern light and citizens danced in taverns. Alessandro retreated to the ramparts. He gazed at Monticello's distant towers and the dark outline of the Po River beyond. A cool breeze carried the distant drone of Venetian drums. He reflected on his journey from an idealist who believed in goodwill above all, to a strategist who wove alliances and rumors with equal dexterity. He felt the quiet pride of a craftsman who had shaped events like clay, yet also the weight of Machiavelli's caution. Fortunes could shift like sand. Alessandro unclasped his cloak and sat on the cold stone. He drew his journal from an inner pocket and wrote, "Alliances serve like brittle props beneath a bridge. They support until the tide rises. A prudent ruler must bolster alliances with reserves and concealed preparations. To govern is to foresee, to persuade, and to plan for betrayal, even among friends." He closed the journal and looked eastward, toward Mantua. In the stillness, he sensed the city's heartbeat, Tite's reliance on his guidance. He understood that Verona's future depended not on a single victory, but on the endless vigilance of those who governed. and he, Alessandro Conte, had committed himself to that vigilance, wearing both the mask of goodwill and the mantle of shadows. In this delicate dance of power, he had found his true calling. The shadow of power. Years flowed like the Adige River, and Alessandro Conte's name became synonymous with Verona itself. His early idealism had hardened into a solemn resolve, tempered by the lessons of Machiavelli. He had risen from aspirant counselor to chancellor, the city's highest office, where statues bore his likeness and his decrees shaped every facet of civic life. Yet behind the ceremonial robes and polished speeches lay a vast network of influence, on invisible lattice of favors, secrets, and obligations that bound nobles, merchants, and soldiers to his will. That autumn, rumors surfaced of dissent among the banking houses. Carlo Benedetti, once Alessandro's closest friend, now stood at the head of a powerful syndicate whose wealth could sway elections. Whispers accused Benedetti of funneling gold to counselors in exchange for privileged contracts. Though unproven, the gossip threatened to undermine Alessandro's authority if the city believed financial interests trumped civic duty. Any alliance he brokered could unravel. He knew that power clung to perception. A single rumor unchecked could topple even a wise ruler. One evening, Alessandro summoned Benedetti to his private study-paneled room lit by a single brazier, its embers glowing like coals of unspoken truths. Benedetti entered with pride mingled with caution, offering elaborate greetings. Alessandro greeted him warmly, yet reservedly. "Carlo," he said, "Verona faces challenges from within as well as without. I have heard troubling reports about your dealings." Benedetti's eyes flickered. He insisted on his innocence, claiming political rivals sought to tarnish his name. Alessandro listened, nodding, as though considering forgiveness, then offered a proposition: withdraw from public contract bids for 6 months. In return, I shall support your application to open a new lending branch in Milan. Benedetti's relief was palpable. He agreed on the spot. By framing the concession as a favor, Alessandro rooted his rival's threat and gained leverage over him. Yet Alessandro did not stop there. Machiavelli had taught him to anticipate betrayal even among those placated. He instructed his agents to discreetly audit Benedetti's records while installing loyal clerks in the syndicate's foreign offices. Should Benedetti renege on their understanding, Alessandro would have proof of duplicity and the power to expose him. By weaving trust and surveillance, Alessandro ensured that Benedetti's gratitude was as fragile as spun glass. Meanwhile, Alessandro turned his gaze to the council itself. Over years of leadership, he had cultivated a cadre of dependable allies. Countess Loredana, now Minister of Commerce, Captain Aureliano, commander of the city guard, and Bishop Matteo, whose sermons subtly guided public sentiment. Each owed him a personal debt, favors granted, dangers averted, titles bestowed. Their loyalty, however, was transactional, not filial. Alessandro maintained balance by rotating privileges, ensuring no single counselor grew too powerful or resentful. He met secretly with each under flickering lanterns in hidden chambers, listening to their concerns while reinforcing their reliance on his patronage in public. He wore the mask of impartial statesman, justice for all, stability above all. He presided over tribunals with measured dignity, his voice echoing in the vaulted hall. Peasants praised his fairness. Merchants lauded his wisdom. Diplomats admired his poise. Yet in private, he knew that every verdict, every decree, was a move in a grand chess game. When a minor noble complained of excessive taxes, Alessandro adjusted the levy, then arranged for a lucrative trade license to reward the noble for compliance. When a guildmaster threatened strike, Alessandro offered discreet concessions to union leaders, simultaneously ordering the city guard to disperse agitators should unrest flare. By blending concession with coercion, he maintained order without appearing tyrannical. One crisp winter's dawn, word arrived from Lombardy. The Duke of Mantua, once placated by Alessandro's diplomacy, had resumed aggressive posturing. His troops massed again near the border, emboldened by a secret treaty with Ferrara's rival in Milan. The city trembled. Merchants hoarded goods. Panic spread through taverns. The council appealed to Alessandro for counsel. He convened a midnight session in the Hall of Statutes, summoning commanders, envoys, and counselors alike. The torches cast dancing shadows on the stone walls as Alessandro laid out his plan. An immediate show of force to deter Mantua, while opening clandestine negotiations to fracture the ducal alliance. Some counselors urged full mobilization. Others feared war. Alessandro silenced them with a steady gaze. "Our strength is not in swords alone," he declared. "We will demonstrate resolve, yet leave doorways ajar for parley. Let Mantua doubt our intention more than our capability." He sent his envoy, disguised as a merchant, to Ferrara's rival in Milan, bearing proposals of trade and mutual defense. At home, he ordered the fortifications at Monticello quietly reinforced under cover of night, ensuring that when the Mantuan army marched, it would face not hollow walls but well-prepared ramparts. Concurrently, he leaked rumors of Verona's secret alliance with the Pope, whose armies could intervene should Verona's defenses falter. The Mantuan duke, confronted by conflicting intelligence, hesitated. War was a costly gamble. The duke withdrew his banners, demanding only nominal concessions for continued peace. When the council celebrated, Alessandro's features betrayed no triumph. He accepted their gratitude with a grave nod, reinforcing his image as humble guardian. Despite these successes, Alessandro sensed cracks in the facade of unity. He glimpsed tension in Countess Loredana's eyes when he denied her request to expand the docks. And he read unease in Bishop Matteo's letters when he refused to endorse a new cathedral grant. Their dependence on his favor alone was brittle. He needed a deeper bond. He devised a new council charter, granting each senior member a stake in the city's governance, a formal title with clearly defined responsibilities, and a share in revenues tied to performance. By embedding them into the administrative framework, he transformed their allegiance from personal patronage to institutional duty. They became stewards of Verona's prosperity. and any rebellion against Alessandro also threatened their own positions in the solitude of his study. Alessandro reflected on his transformations. He unrolled a large map on his desk, tracing borders and supply lines with a jeweler's precision. He recalled the idealistic youth who had believed in pure virtue and the devastating lessons that followed. Now, he recognized that his power rested not merely on the Machiavellian doctrines he had embraced, but on his unique synthesis, the appearance of benevolence wedded to unwavering strategy. Verona thrived under this balance. Trade boomed, streets remained peaceful, and the citizenry felt secure. Yet he understood that each day required vigilance. Power, once secured, could slip away if neglected. He reopened his journal and penned a final reflection for the night. True mastery of power lies in shaping loyalty and fear so that both serve the state. One must reward virtues when they align with one's ends and punish offenses with swift discretion. The shadows of governance are as vital as its visible proclamations. As he closed the leather cover, the brazier's glow dimmed, and moonlight slipped through the window's iron grille. Outside, Verona lay silent under a dusting of snow, peaceful, prosperous, and secure. Within its hallways and hidden corridors, Alessandro Conte's presence was felt in every whisper of breeze and flicker of torchlight. He had become the city's shadow and its shield, embodying Machiavelli's teachings to protect the realm. Yet in the quiet of his chambers, could not escape a lingering question. How long could the city prosper under a ruler who wore both compassion and calculation as masks? Only time would reveal whether his synthesis of goodness and guile would endure, crumble beneath the weight of its own cunning. The true measure, decades had etched silver strands into Alessandro Conte's dark hair. But his posture remained as erect as the marble pillars that lined Verona's council hall. The city thrived beneath his cobblers, stitched with renewed vigor. Merchants imported silks from distant lands, and artisans sculpted fountains that danced in sunlit plazas. Statutes praised his prudence, and chronicles lauded his victories. Yet on this spring morning, as magnolia petals drifted across the courtyard, Alessandro felt the familiar tug of unease. He understood that the art of statecraft demanded constant vigilance even in times of apparent peace. It began with a simple plea, clad in rough-spun tunic and worn boots, knelt before the marble dais in the Hall of Statutes. His voice trembled as he addressed the assembled councilors. Bandits roamed the foothills near his village, pillaging grain and terrorizing farmers. He begged for protection, for soldiers, for mercy. The council members exchanged glances. The matter seemed minor, trivial, compared to border tensions and trade disputes. Some suggested directing Pietro to local militias. Others counseled patience, warning of depleted coffers. When Alessandro rose, the session hushed. He regarded Pietro with a steady, compassionate gaze. His voice, though resonant, carried humility. "Your plight is our city's burden," he declared. "No family should ever fear for their livelihood." Instantly, Pietro's eyes brightened. Alessandro continued, I will dispatch a contingent of 10 soldiers to secure your village. Under the command of Captain Aureliano, you shall receive a weekly stipend, drawn from the city's reserve fund until the bandits are driven off." Murmurs of approval rippled through the chamber. Yet in his mind, Alessandro weighed the decision with Machiavelli's dual mandates: mercy balanced by prudence. 10 soldiers could deter a handful of brigands, and the stipend would sustain villagers. While fortifications were erected, but every resource allocated here reduced Verona's readiness elsewhere. A message had come that same morning from Milan. Envoys sought to renegotiate tariffs. Should Alessandro refuse them in favor of Pietro's petition, he risked appearing inattentive to powerful partners. Should he grant both, his treasury might fray. He recalled Machiavelli's counsel: one must be sparing with resources to avoid ruin. After the council, Alessandro lingered in the hall's shadowed recesses. He summoned Captain Aureliano, his oldest friend and most trusted commander. "Dispatch your men by sunset," he instructed. "Then return here. We shall refine the stipend's terms." Aureliano bowed. "Your wisdom shines, my lord," he said, though Alessandro knew the captain also understood the delicate balance. Overcommitment could weaken Verona's defenses. True to his word, Alessandro issued the decree. By evening, soldiers marched through the city gates, their banners fluttering as citizens cheered. Notices were hammered to tavern doors and marketplace stalls. The Chancellor orders protection for Monte di Valgrana. Aid will arrive. Pietro's village of roughly 70 souls was saved from immediate peril, and hope permeated the valley's dot. Yet that night, under the glow of lantern light, Alessandro retreated to his private study, a circular chamber lined with maps and ledgers. He examined the stipend fund. Enough remained for one more such relief, but no more. He contemplated Milan's request. The envoys awaited his response by dawn. His options were clear: grant generous trade terms and risk a depleted reserve, or delay negotiations and secure safe passage for Monte di Valgrana. He hesitated, recalling the afternoons spent in his youth quarreling with his parents over charity. Back then, he had believed generosity must never be rationed. He recognized that unguarded benevolence invited ruin. He opened his journal and wrote, "To govern heart and treasury alike requires knowing when to exercise mercy and when to weigh it against the greater good. A single act of compassion must never compromise the security of the whole." Having written this, Alessandro devised a compromise. At midnight, he summoned Verona's chief treasurer, Signora Valeria. "Send half the requested tariff relief to Milan," he ordered. "Offer them reduced duties on silks, but maintain higher levies on basic grains." Valeria, meticulously attentive to every florin, nodded. "And the balance?" she asked. "Redirect it to the reserve fund earmarked for frontier relief," Alessandro replied. Thus, he preserved essential resources while advancing Verona's commercial interests. By dawn's first light, the Milanese envoys received word of Alessandro's accord. They applauded the silken concessions, unaware of the grain tariffs, retention, Merchants in Verona welcomed the news, expecting a boon to luxury trade. The general populace remained calm, comforted by the city's stability. Pietro's village, meanwhile, received its stipend and, under Aureliano's command, fortified its mills and granaries. Bandits, confronted by fortified walls and disciplined troops, found no easy spoils. Within 2 weeks, reports declared the roads secure and farmers at ease. The council convened once more to celebrate. This twin victory, diplomatic tact and domestic protection. Alessandro presided, dignified yet unassuming. When speeches concluded, he offered a brief address. Verona's strength lies not in singular acts of charity or commerce, but in the harmony between heart and prudence. We must never allow compassion to blind us to duty, nor caution to stifle humanity.
Yes.
Verona endures. He saw how his decisions had reinforced both trade and security, how one concession did not invalidate the other, but had been woven into a coherent policy. He recalled the days when he had believed in virtue as a solitary force, only to learn that virtue, untempered, could prove brittle. Now, virtue guided by foresight had safeguarded both distant caravans and humble villagers. In the following weeks, travelers spoke of the chancellor's deft governance. Poets composed verses celebrating peace on 2 fronts. Taverns announced free wine nights in gratitude for safe passage. Noble families toasted Alessandro's name alongside those of Verona's patron saints. The city thrummed with pride and prosperity, yet Alessandro did not rest on laurels. In his nightly reflections, he continued to question each decision had he allotted to few soldiers. Would Milanese merchants feel betrayed by the grain tariffs? Could the bandits regroup elsewhere? He catalogued these concerns in his journal, framing new contingency plans, stockpiles at alternate sites, covert envoys to Mantua should they exploit perceived weakness, and a gradual increase of militia recruitment across remote hamlets. One evening, as Alessandro walked the ramparts alone, he heard the distant laughter of children playing in the plaza below. Lanterns glowed like steadfast stars. He paused at the gatehouse, holding his cloak against the night air. City seemed to breathe with him, secure and alive. He reflected on the path from his youthful optimism to his seasoned statesmanship. He had learned that to save a single village required strategy as much as sympathy. That to enrich a kingdom demanded both generosity and restraint. He gazed eastward toward Monte di Valgrana, visible as a faint silhouette against the moonlit hills. Pietro's family tended their fields in peace, unaware of the careful calculations that ensured their safety. Alessandro thought of Machiavelli's final admonition: fortune favors the prepared mind, rewards the prudent heart. He closed his eyes, acknowledging the depth of truth in those words, as the wind whispered through the battlements. Alessandro Conte, Chancellor of Verona, Prince of Shadows. and steward of compassion understood the ultimate measure of power. It was not in grand monuments or triumphant banners, but in the unseen harmony between mercy and wisdom, in the quiet choices that safeguarded both state and soul. In that balance lay the true legacy of a ruler, one that would endure far beyond. The echo of his name